Stop looking for obvious signs of a spiritual gift right now, because the most powerful one is literally in the palm of your hand, and you've probably felt it hundreds of times without understanding what it was. Edgar Cayce, the man who in a trance diagnosed thousands of illnesses with a precision that the medicine of his time could not explain, recorded that the ability to heal is not a privilege of the chosen few, nor a mystical talent reserved for distant monks and shamans. He asserted with a conviction that spanned decades of documented records that this potential sleeps within every human being, waiting only to be recognized through very concrete physical signs, sensations that the body emits like a radio, tuning into a frequency that the rational mind does not yet know how to name. And if you've come this far, it's very likely that your body has already tried to warn you about this more than once. In the next few minutes, I'll show you the 7 signs that Cayce identified as physical markers of the healing gift, real sensations felt in the hands and chest that most people ignore or attribute to coincidence, fatigue, or nervousness, when in fact they are the most direct evidence that a dormant ability to channel healing energy exists within you. Pay attention to each one of them, because at least one will describe exactly something you've already experienced. Start by paying attention to your own hands right now, because the first sign is so simple that most people dismiss it immediately. Cayce described this phenomenon as a spontaneous warmth that arises in the palms, a heating that has no relation to ambient temperature, physical exertion, or common blood circulation. It is a warmth that is born from within, which intensifies in very specific moments, almost always linked to the presence of another's pain. Think about the last time you held the hand of someone who was suffering, a sick relative, a desperate friend, a hurt child crying in your lap. Do you remember feeling your palms heat up, almost tingle, as if something inside you was automatically reacting to that person's suffering? This is not imagination. According to Cayce's records, this thermal reaction is the physical body translating, in sensory language, a much deeper energetic process that is happening in the energy centers of the hands, points that ancient healing traditions in different cultures have always treated as portals for the exit and entry of vital force. Think of it like an electrical cord that has always been connected to the outlet, but only lights up when someone plugs an appliance into the other end. The other person's pain is the appliance, your hands are the cord, and the warmth is the energy flowing. True compassion, the kind that clutches your chest and makes you want to do something immediately, even without knowing what, is usually the most common trigger for this warmth. It is also common to feel this during deep prayer or silent meditation, moments when the mind stops generating noise and the body, finally free from mental interference, begins to operate at a subtler frequency. Many people report waking up in the middle of the night with warm hands, for no apparent reason, and later discover that at that exact time a distant loved one was going through a crisis. Cayce called this energetic synchronicity, proof that physical distance is not an obstacle for those who have already developed, even if unconsciously, a heightened energetic sensitivity. If you have felt this warmth more than once, especially near someone who was suffering, your body was already trying to tell you in the only language it knows that there is a latent capacity for channeling healing there. The second sign requires a bit more attention because it is subtler than the first, but once you learn to perceive it, you will never stop noticing it. It is the difference in sensation between the two hands, which Cayce and various traditions, energies called it polarity consciousness. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine your two open hands, one facing the other, as if you were holding an invisible ball between them. Many people, when trying this simple exercise, notice that one hand seems to push something, a sensation of pressure coming from the palm, while the other seems to pull, as if it were sucking something from the environment. This asymmetry is not a flaw in perception, nor a psychological suggestion. For Cayce, it reflects the very energetic structure of the human body, which functions in a bipolar manner, just as a magnet has a positive and a negative pole, or as a battery needs two terminals to generate current. One hand tends to act as an emitter, projecting energy outward, while the other acts as a receiver, absorbing information and impressions from the environment and people around. Those who clearly perceive this difference usually also perceive other things more sharply. They enter a room and immediately sense if the atmosphere is tense or light. They shake hands with a stranger and get an instant impression about that person's character, without being able to rationally explain where that certainty came from. This is not a coincidence, nor an exaggeration of the imagination. It is the same sensitivity that allows hands to feel warmth in the face of another's pain, only now manifesting as a broader perception, almost like an internal radar that picks up what the eyes and ears cannot register. Cayce insisted that this type of perception, although it seems abstract, is absolutely trainable. The more one consciously pays attention to this difference between the hands, the more it refines itself, exactly like a muscle that strengthens with repeated use. The person who notices this and doesn't dismiss it as nonsense gradually begins to develop a keen intuition about people, environments, and situations, an instinct that seems to come from nowhere, but which has actually always been there, in the hands themselves, waiting to be recognized. Speaking of people who ignore their own signs, I want to take a break here because I deeply believe that anyone who has reached this point in the video is not just curious, they are recognizing their own story being told. And if these first two signs have already resonated with you, what comes next will further deepen this perception, so stay with me until the end, because what Cayce described as the third sign is usually the most impressive of all, the one that science still cannot explain, but which millions of people around the world report feeling in the same way, regardless of culture, religion, or background. The third sign is the sensation of tingling, pulsing, or a light electric current running through the hands, often accompanied by an almost uncontrollable urge to touch or get closer to someone who is suffering. Unlike heat, which is a constant thermal sensation, this tingling usually comes in waves like small discharges that move up and down the fingers and palm, similar to that numbness sensation when a limb is deprived of circulation, but without any apparent physical cause. Cayce interpreted this phenomenon as the perceptible movement of life force, that which various traditions call prana, chi, or vital energy, moving more intensely and faster through the energetic channels of the hands. And here is the most fascinating detail. Many people report feeling this tingling even before they rationally know that someone nearby is suffering physically or emotionally. It is as if the body picks up the information before the mind processes the facts. Imagine being at a family gathering, everything seemingly calm, and suddenly your hands start to tingle for no reason, a restlessness you can't explain. Minutes later, someone reveals they are going through a serious problem, a newly discovered illness, a financial crisis, an emotional pain hidden behind a polite smile. The tingling came before the news. This isn't premonition in the dramatic sense that movies often portray. It's energetic sensitivity operating in real time, picking up micro-expressions, subtle tensions in the environment, almost imperceptible changes in the energy of those nearby, and translating it all into a concrete physical sensation before the rational mind can piece things together. People who have this latent healing gift often report this type of experience throughout their lives, often since childhood, without ever having had a name for it. They simply learn to ignore it, to label it nervousness or anxiety, when in reality it was the body communicating, in the only way it knew how, that energy was moving, seeking a place to be directed, to help, to heal. The fourth sign is perhaps the most counterintuitive of all, because most people associate the gift of healing exclusively with the ability to help others, completely forgetting that, according to Cayce, no one can give what they do not have. This sign is the capacity for self-healing, the surprising ease that certain people have in recovering quickly from illnesses, injuries, surgeries, or even deep emotional shocks, as if the body itself knew, instinctively, how to accelerate the regeneration process. You may have known someone like this, or perhaps it's you. That person who suffers a bad cut, and a few days later, the wound has already healed in an impressive way. The one who catches a bad flu and, instead of staying in bed for a whole week, recovers in 48 hours. The one who goes through a devastating emotional loss, cries, feels deeply, but finds a path back to balance much faster than would seem reasonably expected. Cayce saw this as a direct reflection of high energetic vitality, a kind of internal reserve of life force that the body can mobilize when necessary. And he made a point of clarifying that this is not just an isolated biological curiosity. it is a prerequisite. The logic is simple and profound at the same time. Imagine trying to fill someone else's glass with a pitcher that is practically empty. No matter the good intention, no matter how much you want to help, if there is no water in the pitcher, there is nothing to offer. Similarly, those who wish to channel healing to others must first have energy and balance within their own bodies. This is not about physical perfection. No one needs to be free of any pain or limitation to have this gift. But there is a fundamental difference between someone who lives chronically exhausted, drained, with no capacity for regeneration, and someone who, even facing real health or emotional challenges, maintains a spark of vitality that allows the body to reorganize itself with unusual speed. This spark is precisely the fuel that can later be directed outward, to help other people find their own path to regeneration. If you recognize this ability in yourself, if you have always been the person who recovers too quickly in the eyes of others, this is not genetic luck. According to Cayce, it is the physical signature of a vital reserve that is asking to be shared. The fifth sign explains something that many people live their whole lives without understanding, and which is sometimes mistaken for shyness, excessive introspection, or even social anxiety problems, intense sensitivity to certain people and places. Have you ever entered an environment, perhaps a crowded party, a busy shopping mall, a hospital, and felt a sudden, disproportionate exhaustion, as if all your energy had been drained in a matter of minutes? Or have you ever been near a specific person and felt real physical discomfort, a tightness in your chest, an instant urge to get away without being able to explain rationally the reason? Cayce described these reactions as a sign of heightened energetic attunement, the same sensitivity that generates warmth in the hands and perceptible tingling, only now operating on a larger scale, capturing not just the suffering of a specific person, but the collective energetic field of entire environments. Think of how an extremely sensitive microphone picks up even the slightest background noise in a silent room, while a regular microphone only registers loud, obvious sounds. People with this latent gift function as ultra-sensitive microphones in a world full of energetic noise, absorbing the tensions, anxieties, and imbalances of others without consciously realizing they are doing it. And herein lies the true danger of this signal when it is not understood. The natural tendency is to absorb all this suffering as if it were one's own, carrying the emotional weight of entire crowds, of charged environments, of people in crisis, until reaching a point of complete exhaustion, without understanding why one feels so tired without having made any apparent physical effort. Cayce was categorical in stating that the goal should never be to absorb this energy, but rather to learn to act as a channel, allowing the energy to flow through oneself without clinging to it, without carrying it into one's own body and mind. It is the difference between being a sponge which absorbs everything and becomes soaked and heavy, and being a pipe through which water passes freely without leaving residue. Learning this difference is, according to Cayce's records, one of the most important steps in the conscious development of the healing gift, because without this discernment, the very sensitivity that could be used to help others turns into a constant source of personal depletion and suffering. We now come to the sixth sign, which Cayce considered one of the most profound and, at the same time, one of the easiest to feel physically when one knows where to pay attention. The activation of what he called the heart center, an energetic region associated, in the tradition he followed, with the thymus, that small gland located behind the sternum, between the lungs, which modern medicine recognizes mainly for its role in the immune system during childhood, but which ancient spiritual traditions have always treated as a point of direct connection between the physical body and something greater. Have you ever felt in a moment of deep compassion a real physical sensation in your chest? I'm not talking about an abstract or poetic feeling. I'm talking about concrete warmth, an almost physical expansion, as if the chest were literally opening up, sometimes accompanied by a lump in your throat, or spontaneous tears that well up without conscious effort. This usually happens in very specific moments, when seeing a genuine act of kindness between strangers, when witnessing the forgiveness of someone who has suffered deeply, when holding a small child who instinctively trusts you, when receiving the affectionate and wary approach of an animal that normally avoids people. Cayce pointed out that children and animals have an almost infallible ability to perceive when this heart center is active in someone, because they operate primarily through energetic perception, not through language or social appearance. A child who approaches a stranger for no apparent reason, or a suspicious dog that suddenly cuddles up next to someone they just met, is responding to this energetic opening, to this quality of presence that emanates from an activated heart. And here is the most important point that Cayce made sure to highlight. This activation is directly linked to the ability to welcome the pain of the other without judgment, without trying to fix it, without rushing to offer advice or solutions, just by being present with an open heart, allowing the other person to feel genuinely seen and welcomed. This kind of presence, silent, without agenda, without rush, is in itself a profound act of healing, often more powerful than any word or technique. If you have ever felt this expansive warmth in your chest at someone else's pain or joy, or if children and animals seem to naturally feel safe around you for no apparent reason, this is not effective coincidence. It is the heart center communicating through the most direct physical sensation possible that it is active, open, and ready to be a channel for genuine healing. The seventh sign is, without a doubt, the most intriguing of all, because it manifests not only as immediate physical sensation, but as an inexplicable, almost magnetic attraction to certain themes, symbols, and traditions, even without any logical explanation for where this affinity comes from. Cayce, who throughout thousands of recorded sessions recurrently spoke of the continuity of the soul through different existences, described this phenomenon as past life memories linked to healing, profound recognitions of abilities that were already developed in other times and are now being reactivated in the present existence. Have you ever felt an inexplicable attraction to symbols from ancient healing traditions, even without ever having formally studied them? Have you found yourself deeply fascinated by shamanic practices, by rituals of indigenous peoples, by esoteric traditions of cultures distant from your own, feeling a strange familiarity as if it were not new but rather recognition? Have you had vivid, recurring dreams involving scenarios, clothing, or healing practices that are not part of your current reality, but which seem to carry an emotional weight disproportionate to the simple imagination of an ordinary dream? Cayce described these experiences as imprints of the soul, energetic records of knowledge acquired in other existences that, even if not consciously remembered in detail, leave marks in the form of inexplicable attractions, sensations of instant familiarity, and in many cases dreams that carry real information about healing practices that the person has never studied in this life. It is like carrying an entire library of knowledge within oneself, whose pages are still largely closed, but whose titles from time to time appear before our eyes, awakening an interest that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. If you have always felt this inexplicable attraction, if certain symbols, sacred places, ancestral traditions, or spiritual practices have always awakened in you something deeper than common intellectual curiosity, Cayce would say that this is not cultural coincidence. It is the soul recognizing through a sense of almost physical familiarity a capacity that was once developed and that is now asking to be reactivated, integrated, and put back into service. And we arrive at the most important point of everything said so far, the eighth and final element, which Cayce considered the true closure of this entire process, because recognizing the 7 previous signs, however impactful this perception may be, is not enough in itself. Many people go through their entire lives feeling the warmth in their hands, the difference in polarity, the tingling, the ease of self-healing, the intense sensitivity, the activation of the heart, and the attraction to ancient traditions, and yet they never truly develop the gift, simply because they treat these signs as interesting curiosities, stories to tell in a conversation, and not as a call that demands a practical response. Cayce was emphatic in stating that the potential for healing, to become real and effective, needs to be cultivated consistently through very specific practices, regular meditation, which trains the mind to silence mental noise sufficiently to perceive energetic subtleties with clarity, sincere prayer which establishes a conscious connection with something greater than the ego itself, genuine care for physical health because, as we have already seen in the 4th sign, No one can offer vitality that they do not possess. Deep self-knowledge, which allows distinguishing between the energy that truly needs to be channeled outward and one's own unresolved traumas and wounds that, if not addressed, end up contaminating any attempt to help others. And constant ethical practice, because, according to Cayce, the gift of healing should never be treated as personal power, as something that magnifies the ego of the one who possesses it, but rather as humble service, as the ability to become a clean and available channel for something greater to flow through oneself towards those in need. This distinction between personal power and channeling a higher source is, perhaps, the most profound teaching in all of Cayce's work on this subject. He repeatedly insisted that those who seek healing as a way to stand out, to be recognized, to feel special or superior to others, end up blocking the very flow they try to control, because genuine healing energy does not obey the ego. It flows freely only through those who truly place themselves in service, without attachment to the outcome, without the need for recognition, without the arrogance of believing that healing comes from themselves and not through themselves. If throughout this video you have recognized more than one of these 7 signs in your own life experience, perhaps it's time to stop treating it as a coincidence or a personal quirk and start seeing it as a real calling, which indeed requires discipline, humility, and constant practice, but which, when cultivated with seriousness, can transform not only your own life, but the lives of all the people who cross your path. If at least 3 of these 7 signs describe something you have already felt in your skin, in your chest, or in your own hands, comment below "Eu reconheço o dom" to mark this moment as the instant you stopped ignoring what your body has always tried to tell you. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who has always had hands that are too warm, too much sensitivity, a heart that opens too easily to the suffering of others, share this video with that person, because perhaps this is exactly what they needed to hear today.